I've met so many incredible people in so many different areas of the veterinary profession with different stories and different paths and different realities that I think it helped me grow as a veterinarian. Because veterinarian is not all about medicine, right? Like most of us have got that part down.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Our guest today is Dr. Brian Bourquin, the president of the Not One More Vet Association, also called NOMV, and owner of 5 small animal practices around the Boston area. If I had to narrow down what he shares with us to a single theme, I would say mentorship. Brian expresses his love for the veterinary profession, and a lot of it is through the people who have supported him, and now in his current career phase where he is devoting most of his time to mentoring others, either in his practices or through the multiple organizations he is part of. You will learn a lot either if you consider yourself more in the mentee stage or in the mentor stage. At the beginning of the episode, you will learn questions to ask yourself or help others answer to understand what vet school might be best for them, how to pick your first job as a veterinarian. Then Brian explains how mentors helped him learn through his career mistakes to get to now where he has never been more fulfilled in his veterinary career. So let's get to the conversation with Dr. B. When did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
I'm one of those very non-originals who would have always wanted to be. My parents joked that one of the first words out of my mouth was veterinarian, which I think was a very big word since I couldn't say the word onion. But yeah, both my grandparents were dairy farmers. I grew up around animals. I didn't realize that not everyone had cows in their backyard until I was probably in elementary school. So, kittens or baby calves, just the whole 9 yards. And I knew that I wanted to be involved with them somehow. And then I remember, I don't know what age I was, but like seeing a cow delivered. And I was like, okay, well, maybe not so much the large animal part. We'll hang out with the kittens and the puppies. And kind of the rest was history.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Now, when you were starting to look at getting into vet school, did you have an idea? You mentioned cats and dogs, maybe. Did that kind of fluctuate, change? Did you explore throughout vet school?
No, not at all. I mean, unfortunately, the production side of veterinary medicine is not super great. So at once again, a fairly early age, when I realized that my little veal cat friends were not actually going off to another farm, that they were no longer with us, that pretty much killed large animal medicine for me. There weren't small hoof stock, so I didn't know about goats and sheep. So it was basically dairy cow and the occasional horse. And otherwise, it was all dogs and cats. So I worked for a veterinarian, small animal veterinarian, I think from the age of 14 on, and just quickly realized, was drawn to, oh, I love the animals. I do love the animals, but also just seeing the connection between the animal and at that time we called them owners, but now a pet parent, and just how you can really make a difference in someone's life. Where I grew up was very rural. And, for some people who had lost family members, I mean, really their pet was their connection to life. And, seeing the joy and sometimes the sadness when something happened to one of those pets just really became the connection. I'm a disgusting extrovert. I mean, I'm happy I get my energy from people. And so being able to see that I could make a change, or the veterinarian I work for could make a change. I don't know if I was making much of a change back then. Just even cemented even more that it was a profession I wanted. And yeah, it was dogs. Well, I'm going to run it right. I mean, when I was 6, that was the first job. I would single-handedly run the Cincinnati Zoo and all the animals myself. But then, reality struck later in life, and I became mainly small animal focused with what I thought at the time was going to be exotics, which didn't really turn out that way, but that was the original plan.
Yeah. So just on that note with the exotics, it says it didn't turn out. Is that just because there weren't very many in the rural setting, or decided,
yeah, that was always the idea. So, literally I was going to go into what I thought zoo medicine, and I kept that track kind of through that school. I mean, Cornell didn't allow us to officially track, right? So we had to do large animal, small animal, but any externship I had, any extra classes, I wasn't taking horse floating of teeth. I was taking small ruminants, or I was taking your pocket pet. And then my externships all were, I did the Royal Vet School in London, their exotics department, exotics at Angel Memorial, exotics at AMC in New York. They're some of the best programs. And then I actually did a zoo rotation, and I hated every minute of it. It was not my dream of feeding all the animals at the Cincinnati Zoo. The zookeepers, really the ones who are personally involved with the animals. And to me, at least in my short period review, it was a lot of paper pushing. It was a lot of bureaucracy. And truth be told, well, yes, I think there's a place for zoos. And I know that I don't want to get out of soapbox here. I don't know that we still are doing the best job at them. I think it's way better now than it was 20 years ago. But, seeing the pacing of the large cat and the wolves, everything's anesthetized to work with it. It just quickly was not where I saw my passion. And then when you get out in the real world and you're not working with amazing veterinarians and amazing techs who know how to hold an exotic pet and know what they're doing, and suddenly that burden is on your shoulder. I think I had one parakeet where I almost chopped off its nail because the person didn't hold it right. And I said, what? I think I can stick with dogs and cats and be happy. I'll watch those shows on TV. And so that was the end of my audit. I have huge mad props to those who do it. And especially in this day and age when the medicine is so advanced, and you used to be that it was kind of like the MacGyver of veterinary medicine was doing exotics, and it comes so far. So I really feel like to do it right, it needs to be pretty much what you have to do. And I still love my dogs and cats. So very long-winded answer to your question, but that's kind of where exotics came and went.
Yeah, no, that's very good. My personal story is not too different as well. I came in wanting to do zoo and marine mammal and conservation. And all through vet school, I was pursuing those things, but I was noticing the same things that you were on what the veterinarian is actually doing in these settings is not what I was wanting to do. And so you start to transition. Oh, okay. So let's keep exploring and seeing what else is out there and where can I thrive and be happy at the same time. So all of those are great observations, and it's perfectly fine to change your mind.
This could be the PSA for any young vet students who are listening to this program. They can reach out to us. They can tell them what the real story is. So now I look back and I'm like, well, that was fun and stuff. I had some really cool things. Had I been able to put that time and energy into maybe more internal medicine or, God forbid, ophthalmology, there's other ways where I look back and I'm like, wow, had I, you say if I could talk to little me, I may say, you know what, maybe skip pocket pets and spend a little bit more time on ophthalmology. But this is going to be our public service announcement for not to crush people's dream, right? Dream big. But the reality is, I think, a little bit different of the situation.
Yes, I think staying curious to lots of different things is a good way to be, because that is where you are more likely to find where you truly fit and keep going forward. So you focused on the cats and dogs, and so you were in the Boston area, and it sounds like you kind of stayed in that area. After vet school, where did you go, and what were you looking for in maybe your first job as a veterinarian?
Sure. It's very simple. I didn't want rural. I loved where I grew up. It was a super safe area. We didn't lock our cars or our houses. A little Boy Scout would walk up and down the street and knock on strangers' doors and sell them overpriced gift paper. So I'll never take that back. I love where I grew up. But, as a young man coming to terms with my, my gayness, moving back to rural New York was not really where that was going to be at. And then also socioeconomic. Cornell really taught me what really good medicine can look like. And unfortunately, the socioeconomics of rural New York was that likely I was rural anywhere for that matter. When you're choosing between feeding your kid and the dog or sending the kid to get meds and the dog, often the dog's not winning out. And that's not how I wanted to start my career. And then just also, even taking away gay, just being a young professional, I really wanted city life. For me, it was between Boston and New York. At the time, I was dating someone at Cornell, so that geographically kind of worked. And I joked that, my car is what made the decision for me. I had gotten a fairly new car, and I looked at schools, and I looked at jobs in New York and Boston both. At the time, I think it's still the case, New York doesn't pay great because they don't have to. There's so many other careers where your partner is in fashion, finance, whatever it may be, that have to go to New York. And so you as the partner of said person in those professions. So it's really a saturated, or was, I talk like I know now, but what I've heard from, others, it hasn't changed that much. These are small little clinics for the most part. And so just wasn't a lot of great job opportunities, and they didn't pay well. So, I was comparing jobs where in New York, I was starting, sadly, like $50,000 back in 2001. And automatically you were going to be living with 2 or 3 roommates. I was going to have to park my car on Long Island. I was probably going to have to do moonlighting, so it's called, where you do shifts overnight. So to start your career where you're already like having to do extra shift just to make ends meet. And then I interviewed at Boston for about the same amount of money at that time. I could get a place with one roommate, who was a veterinarian. I wasn't before strangers. I could park my car behind the house. So it was really, for me, it was like looking at the two. I was going to get the same urban experience from Cornell to New York versus Cornell to Boston. It wasn't a ginormous difference in travel time. I had friends in both places. So I went to St. Lawrence undergrad, which was a huge feeder school for Boston and New York. So I already had kind of a pre-existing family here, friend family, if you will. And that was really important to me. I knew from talking to recent grads that, the shock of being in your little nest of vet school where you've got automatic friends and then moving into the real world, I kind of wanted that mini step of knowing I've had unestablished people to lean on. And gosh, let me tell you, it's probably where I am today is because I did have that family. And so when things came up, you broke up with a boyfriend and family things happened and work sucked and life sucked. I moved here in 2001. There was a lot going on. I moved here, I remember 9/11. So just when all that stuff was happening, it really helped to have a foundation for when days were bad. And I wouldn't have really had that in New York. So I never looked back on my decision to move to Boston. And, here I am 20 some odd years later. And I remember when we opened, which I'm sure we'll get to, but when I opened my business, I was returning to my fiance at the time. I'm like, I guess that means I'm staying here. Because I guess I always had that, like, well, am I going to move to New York? And then opening a business, I thought, well, I guess this is finally this vision that I'm a true Bostonian. And if you see the way I drive, you understand that I am a true Bostonian at heart now. I still speak like I'm not from here, but otherwise I'm Boston through and through.
Well, what a great observation. I find myself in these conversations talking about having a support network and how essential it is to every aspect of life, everything from your emotional well-being, but even from a career perspective, if you feel like you are supported, it's a lot easier to be able to feel like I can do, fill in the blank. So I think that is a great thing to look for, especially in that time of transition when you're trying to figure out who I am as an adult veterinarian.
Yeah, and I don't know that anyone talked about that. I mean, when people were talking about what to look for a job, it's obviously you think mentorship and new equipment and good clientele and all that, but nowhere did anyone say go where you know people because like crap happens. Like you need to move, and most beginning jobs you didn't have extra money to move, so your friends were your movers. You need shoulders to cry on. I moved here and I lost my cat to lung cancer. 3 months after moving here. Trying to get through that. So, I lived with a classmate who was a veterinarian. So having that, and she was going to an internship. So we both kind of had each other. And I don't know that those are things that maybe in this day and age in vet school they do, but going somewhere where you know something or there's just some type of support system. And especially if things aren't going well at work, if you're moving but you're moving primarily for a job, which is what most of us do or an internship. If things aren't going well there, then who do you talk to? My mom's on the phone, but if you need a shoulder to cry on, I think it is important and something that I try to when we have. So we've had a number of kids, I should say kids, young adults who have been with us for externships, and then they look at me for advice. It's one of the things I talk about, like when you're looking at other areas, to talk about where else to go.
Yeah, no, great. Well, on that note, since you have worked with a lot of younger veterinarians and we're kind of talking about that early stage, what are some other big things that you have found are really valuable to know being that young veterinarian, figuring out yourself and what you like to do in vet med?
So go somewhere where you know people. A big thing that we talk about is to do internship versus not to do internship, right? Like that's where kind of my vet students are at. Those that are applying to vet school, we talk about the geography, we talk about the support systems, we talk about comfortability with the area. So, for example, young students who are applying to the island, and which I think is a great opportunity, but talking to them about, vet school is hard enough. Imagine having to adapt to a different culture and getting to the island. And then we make a list of like, what are you looking for in a school? Is it the academics? Is it location? All that stuff. So that's some of the stuff I talked to. And as far as internships, many of the schools, my understanding is they still really push the internships, which is, I think, great. You know, you want to be a surgeon or you want to be a neurologist, like obviously that's the only path toward that. But if you're doing it because you're nervous about starting out on your own, well, I think we really need to talk about the dollars and cents of that. And so I will also have a conversation with, I remember that day sitting in the auditorium at Cornell the day before graduation, and they handed you a little folder, and it was like, well, here's how much you borrowed, which, fortunately, I think most of us knew that. And here's what you're going to pay back with interest. And I was like, holy moly. And for me, like, I just paid off my loan last year. And so if you delay a year because you are wanting to make sure you know good medicine and find a really good job with good mentorship, and don't borrow for another 3 years, and make some money. So kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but we look at a lot of different stuff, what they're looking for in life, location. Do they want to be dealing with a different culture, or even, the difference between the New England versus the South or East Coast, West Coast? And then the finances, like, does an internship really make sense for you? And just really kind of breaking that down into the bits and pieces. And for something, it's just so yes. And sadly, a lot of them have went on to do internships, and, I'm not a specialty hospital, so they haven't come back to me. But I kind of provide mentorship throughout. So when they're looking for that first job, we talk about looking at the different corporate versus non-corporate, referral versus urgent care versus general. I try to be a mentor kind of throughout their educational process. And, and at times, where they'll decide that, Boston Veterinary Clinic maybe isn't right for them, I've still said, still use me as a resource, because I know through my various organizations and Not One More Vet and other stuff, I've got a pretty good network. And even if I don't know that person, I can probably find someone who does. And so I've tried to be a resource because I didn't really have that. When I was looking for a job out of vet school, this was pre-internet. And so you couldn't like Google or Glassdoor or things like that. You just hope to gosh that you made a good decision. And mine was pretty good. But I'll tell you, I had a bunch of classmates that their first decision wasn't. And, now with things being so much more connected, I think we can do a better job helping our new grads to find that first great job, because it really does set the tone for the rest of your career.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And also just to maybe have a couple different people you talk to about things, because I have also noticed things change over time. When I was getting out of vet school, it was an extremely competitive place. A lot of the reasons why they would recommend internships, apart from wanting to specialize down the road, was to help you be more competitive. So at the time, it made you look good and you could be more competitive to go do a 1-year internship and then go. But I think that's very different these days, when I don't think it's this bad anymore. But a few years ago, people were trying to sign contracts to second-year veterinary students. So, there was a great need for veterinarians. And like you said, the pay is almost night and day different from internship to actually getting a job. So I think it is very good. Go ahead and ask people about different opinions, understand your personal situation, and try to find your list of priorities and focus on those for you. One of the things that we talked about was that you started as an associate veterinarian in other people's clinics, and eventually you did start your own business. But you mentioned you did it kicking and screaming. So I'm very curious, what was the story of deciding to be a practice owner?
Sure. Well, I still come from the economy, especially coming from rural New York, where kind of the accepted protocol was you go and work for SteadNet, and eventually they would retire and they would sell to you, right? Like that was kind of the model. De novo, the idea of opening a new clinic, kind of a foreign concept, right? Not a lot of people were doing that. And so I followed the traditional model. I worked for someone for 5-6 years. And as often is the case, that first job, it's hard to ever really get to a point where you are making enough that you can stay there, right? Like it was economics at the time, especially in our urban practice where there are already a few partners. And so I did what I think many have done. I drank the corporate Kool-Aid for a little while, and the pay was better, the benefits were better. In this particular case, the clinic was really looking for someone who had a passion in dentistry, which I did. They helped facilitate that. And so I will never look back as that as a bad option for me at that time. I wish I'd done more homework. I did very little homework, I'm embarrassed to say. But I knew someone that worked there. He was doing well there. And this is where, like times can change. Like at that point, this was a clinic that had been recently bought by a corporation, but it was run by a kind of a family organization, right? So it wasn't private equity money. And so I called it my Camelot year because it was like 5 youngest veterinarians. I think, most of us were been out 6 or 7 years. We actually didn't have a chief of staff. And we just kind of, and I've never heard of this ever working, by the way, but we just kind of led by example, right? It was just, we were all in the same group and we were all so hungry for knowledge and we'd help each other. And that lasted for like 3 or 4 years. Then this particular family sold to private equity. And that's where things really change. Suddenly it's all about your numbers and blood panels you had submitted. And suddenly our hours had been extended. And then we added Sundays. And I don't need to belabor this. We all know what can happen in a corporate situation. And we watched our clinic had, I think, was up to almost 7 doctors at one point, slowly dwindled down to 2 to 3 doctors. Now, the housing crisis was going on down around that time too. So I don't want to blame it all on management. But definitely, we couldn't hold a practice manager to save our life. I think we went through 4 chiefs of staff. And the reason why I mentioned all this is not to poo-poo corporates. But what I learned was like what I did not want to have in the future. So during this time, I bought a condo and I like nice things. And, I was making top dollar, but I wasn't making enough money to redo my house. So I wanted a new kitchen. I wanted, because obviously buying a condo as a young professional, I wasn't buying brand new. And so I started doing relief work. And it started out small, and like most know, relief work can be fairly profitable. And I started working every shift. I don't suggest what I did. I was, every Saturday I was working. Days I got done early, I went to this other practice. But what I found during that is I got to see what a lot of other clinics looked like, right? Other corporations, whether mean to or not. I kind of started like a little Rolodex in my mind, or I guess a checklist would be a better example of what I liked and what I didn't like, what worked and what didn't work. And as things with corporation got worse and worse, I became very toxic. I don't like to throw that word around because I think sometimes it's overused. But what ended up happening was I got to the point I didn't want to see my own dog. Like when I came home and pets coming at me, and I had this distinct memory of like my lab jumping up on me and being like, "Oh, get off me!" And I was like, "Whoa!" So number one was I cut back on the relief work. The extra money was not worth how grumpy I was starting to become. Put the nickname Bitter Blonde Boy, because I was just bitter all the time. I wasn't happy. I didn't like working. It was literally almost like a time clock for me. And so as things got worse and worse at this practice and the management just wasn't working and it was no longer Camelot, most of my friends were no longer there. It was solely just a job. And at that time I was dating who's now my husband, who was an MBA. He was on Wall Street and had a very entrepreneurial way of looking at things. And I'd come home every day, I'm just this really grumpy guy. And I'd worked at kind of the best clinics in Boston. And I was like, well, we're going to have to move. But at this point, I had a condo and I had the connections and my family friends here. So he's like, well, why don't you start your own business? I said, well, that sounds like the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And he's like, well, no, like I've got the financial muscle to do this. You've got the connections, you have the knowledge, it works, it doesn't work. And so he just kept picking at me. And after one just like horrible, horrible day, those days where you just, kind of life-changing days, I was like, that's it. And so we started working on what it would look like to do a concierge mobile practice. Now, I do sometimes feel like I do a lot of bragging, so I like to take myself down a notch a little bit. That business did not work. The name of it was Dr. B's Concierge Veterinary Home Care, which is the longest darn name you've ever had. I said, that's why you should never do a focus group with a bunch of white guys sitting around drinking wine. Because if anyone had stopped to think about just how pompous a name it was, it didn't work. But what it did is it got me out of that corporation, right? It got me out of my own. It got me starting thinking like a business person versus the veterinarian. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can be together. And what I also learned quickly by doing the concierge home visits was kind of fear-free before it had the fancy name, right? So we started doing things differently. I saw in a home setting, I could get away with a lot more than I had in this other clinic. I had already stopped scruffing cats at this point. It just didn't seem wise to me. We stopped doing kind of doggy takedowns for nail trims and some of that stuff. So I was already philosophically kind of doing fear-free before there was a word for it, gentle handling, if you will, from Sophia Yin. And also, when a family entrusts you to come in their house and take care of their pet, and then it's time for a dentistry or a surgery, and now you're referring it away to someone else when you're their trusted veterinarian, there just was a mismatch for me, right? It just didn't work. So fairly quickly, I was like, I love the ability to work with pets not so scared, but I can't not have a clinic. So we started working for a brick and mortar. And at the time, there were a couple banks, and then they still exist, who are very willing to give money to veterinarians. We are a very safe bet. We tend to be very risk adverse as a profession. And so banks are very happy to give us money. And they did. And I looked at a lot of crappy, scary places that I wouldn't want to send my worst pet to. But then we found a place that was not too far from where I began my career, an area where I felt comfortable. It's where I lived. And it had parking. When you talk about different things that delineate you from other practices, it had parking. And so we signed a lease. And, I'll tell you, I don't think I released my breath for a year. I was terrified. I was scared. I didn't think we were going to make it. And I remember the day when I turned to Paul and I said, can I relax now? He said, yes, you can relax now. And so we started out as a scrappy little clinic with myself and another doctor who worked solely on her production, which I wouldn't suggest for anyone, but the only way it would work at that time. We had one CSR. Oh, no, she was a receptionist. We didn't even call her CSR, and a tech. And I was a horrible boss. This is where I had taken all the bad stuff I learned and said I wasn't going to do. And I did a lot of it myself. I was on a power trip. But I learned to become a leader, and our reputation got better, and we did some good medicine, and we got known for doing the extra steps. We got known for fear-free. We were the first fear-free accredited clinic in Boston, second only in Massachusetts. We got beat out by someone who was only 2 employees. Still, they get the distinction, but I think we get almost first one in Boston. And with that really good reputation, word of mouth, also I was a known entity, and we did everything. I was going to the neighborhood barbecues and picnics, and I was hanging on dog barks and, anybody say shaking hands and kissing babies. I was playing fetch and doing all this stuff and just really learning what people wanted. So that was the other side of it, right? I knew on the veterinary side what I wanted, but we started asking, what did the clients want? What was important to them? We had half-an-hour appointments from the beginning so we could take the time, and we charged accordingly. We realized that there was a deficit as far as giving that extended care appointment for those who really wanted to pay for that. And we've held true to that. So I think I answered all your question there. I kind of babbled for a while, but that was the kicking and screaming. And then there was the no breathing. And then there was the relaxing, and then the enjoying, right? So I started to like veterinary medicine again. I liked what I did. I would walk to work in the morning with my dog, and I was excited again. Veterinary medicine was exciting to me, and I wanted to make it different because what I was doing? I could see, I was back to me that little text when I was 14 years old. I was seeing that I was making a difference in these people's lives. That's just that heartwarming joy that I had lost.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I really liked where you talked about you were getting out in the community, not only to be a face, but you started asking people what they were looking for. And I just had a conversation with somebody about how when we think about our clinic or our business, that we might want to be a little bit more targeted in who our audience is and understand what they are looking for, because you can't just always say, well, our audience are pet owners, right? That's a huge audience. But what are the people in your neighborhood looking for? And so what were you finding that people were, I know you mentioned maybe that they were looking for a little bit more time taken in the appointment, but were there other things that you were starting to hear from them that they were looking for in a veterinary clinic?
I've always said that I wanted to run an ad campaign, which I will do at some point when I feel it's safe. That at Boston Veterinary Clinic, we don't have owners, we have pet parents. A little risque, I could probably lose some clientele there. But really, that's what it comes down to. If you just think your pet is something that you own, then we're probably not going to be the right clinic for you. We really advocate for the pet. And, I'd say 85% or 90% of our clientele are pet parents, right? This is I didn't used to like the word, but I've come to embrace it. This is their fur baby. I have a very large gay and lesbian clientele. In many cases, this is their child, for lack of a better term. I have a lot of starter families, right? So, living in the city, and that's why I want to make a little side note here. I am speaking mainly of what my experience as an urban practice. I know this is very different in the suburbs and other areas. So I want to say I'm not judging people in other areas, but for me in an urban practice, a large LGBT clientele where they don't have a two-legged baby, they're four-legged or feathered or beaked or otherwise, as well as a lot of starter families, right? These are young professionals where they are experiencing, maybe it's their first time living with a partner, and they get that first puppy and that first kitten. And the reason why that is important is it's very different than someone that this is their fourth or fifth pet, right? They've been doing this for their whole life. They know that puking once isn't a big deal, a little bit of diarrhea. So they need those extra touch points. And this is also a lot of our clientele, few younger. So first it was millennial and now it's Gen X's. I don't have a lot of boomers. I have some, but not a lot. We get some empty nesters, but this is a generation of information. I mean, they come in with so much information, so many questions. And so, whereas the veterinarian used to be like 90% of their animal knowledge came from the veterinarian, now there's like 100 sources. And so we actually, when you do ads, you kind of pick who your target audience is. And for us, it's a single young professional that this is their first pet. And these are the people who want the extra touch points. They don't want to wait till tomorrow for blood work result. They want things statted. They want the result yesterday, right? Because this is the time of instant information. And so that's a very different look. Oh, we'll send the blood work off and I'll get back to you in a couple of days. Or let's see how it goes. We'll do x-ray tomorrow if we need to. No, most of my clientele, they want it done that day. Sometimes taking that extra day off is a bigger deal than, I took my day off today for Fluffy or Fido. Let's get it all done. And they're also willing to pay for that. So, in my neck of the woods, most of my clientele is fairly, does well enough money-wise, right? So, and there's exceptions, of course, to the rule, and we always give different options, but a lot of times money is not as big an object, and we've learned that about millennials and what looks like Gen X's is that they will go without for their pets. And then the other thing is, fear-free, gentle handling, whatever you want to call it. We definitely, all 5 of our clinics are accredited. So all 5, we use pre-veterinary pharmaceuticals. We sedate when necessary. We will do 3 visits in where other places may have done in 1 to help the animal will actually have some say, if you will. Say is not the right word. But like if we're going to be doing blood work on them, let them be okay with it. And so that takes time and energy and resources that we're willing to meet the clients where they're at. And you'll see that in our reviews. I mean, our reviews for those who get it are outstanding. Like, oh my God, I replied to 3 yesterday. All 3 were cat owners were like, I didn't know that a vet visit could be like this. The doctor took their time. And these are things that if you haven't had a cat or a dog who doesn't do well at the clinic, you may be like, what the hell is the big deal? Like, no animal likes to have blood work done. Well, I'm not saying the cats are coming in and putting their paw out, but we're taking our time with them and not just holding them down and those nits of hell and, just pushing them through it and then wondering why they bite us. And so that is a client that we speak to. Those are the clients that are going to want to come to Boston Veterinary Clinics. Those are the ones that stay with us. And we have people who drive from, hours, they'll move away to still come back to us. And or I've had clients who literally on the West Coast and will still do telemedicine with me within the year, and all the legal ramifications, because they want to hear my way of thinking of things or our way of thinking of things. And so that's the clientele that is going to be drawn to us. We take the time. We really explain things further. We go the extra mile because we understand that that's what they're paying for. And that's really kind of become that's our culture. That's our lifeblood. So the techs and the CSRs who are with us, like they find us and stay with us. So our retention rate is fairly high because they want that experience. They're not going to go back to the days of just getting it done. They want to be able to take their time with the patient and with the pet parent and to explain things and to have those touch points. We are not vaccinarians where, you're not just going to come in and boom, 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 get vaccine. We can for those who want it, but most are coming because they want that expert explanation. They want to get the notes. They want us to go over the blood work with them. And, it being Boston, we got a lot of tech companies. You talked about when the vaccines were made, right, for COVID, Moderna is right here in Boston. Pfizer's here in Boston. So sometimes we talk about vaccines like, oh, yeah, I worked on that. So, that's also our clientele is they're going to demand excellence. There's no BSing, nor would we want to.
Yeah. And I can only imagine that as you are taking more time, you're explaining things, you're also building really great relationships. You talked about people who move and still drive all the way to come and see you. And it sounds like, especially being an extrovert, where being around people gives you energy, those relationships, not only within the clinic, but also with your clients is probably really, really valuable and why people want to stay.
Yes. So the mothership, as we call it, or Bay Village, was our first clinic. And I lived in that community. And there's really literally not room for me in that building anymore. It's a smaller clinic and it's full of doctors. But, obviously I go in there from time to time. And, I was in there, I just popped in like for 10 minutes. And in that time, I saw 3 longstanding clients, they come up and they'll hug me and we're so happy for your success. So we truly are a part of the community. And I touched on that a little bit, but it's advice I'd give to anybody who's listening to this. Any way that you can ingratiate yourself in the community, I think it's so important. I feel like I'm still a cheerleader for veterinary medicine. I still think it's one of the best careers in the world. Yes, I think it needs some work in some ways, but I just still think it's an amazing, amazing career and profession. And for that reason, I like to give back. I grew up as a Boy Scout and church groups and all that business. And so we do so much. We go into buildings, we give pets first aid, we do yappy hours, we give money for all the kid different things. We can, care baskets, we give out gift cards. Because I think it's just so important to give back to the community that's done so much to support us. For us as an urban practice, we actually had to get permission to go into each one of our communities. It's a little kind of a zoning thing in Boston. So I think we are more intricately involved than other ones. And so for us, it's so important to give back. And I think it's also a great way to build clientele. When you talk about SEO and all that, that's all great. But it's also cool to go to the local fundraiser and you see your clientele there, right? And yes, some come up and, oh, my cat did that. But for the most part, it's like, oh my God, Dr. Beatty, so good to see you. And now I'm teaching that to my associates and my medical directors, like get involved in the community. And, it starts to bring that shine back to veterinary medicine, right? Because when it becomes a drudge, like that's not good. That's not good for toxicity. That's not good for compassion fatigue. The one thing that we talk about in Not One More Vet is to really get back to this meeting.
Fantastic. And you talked about giving back not only into your community, but you've also started really working more in organized veterinary medicine and giving back to the veterinary medicine. I think you joined NOMV, as you mentioned, back in 2020. But I've also kind of snooping on you a little bit. You've worked with a lot of different projects. I saw several specifically around mentorship. There's one with AHA and AVMA's Positive Pet Care Guide. So you've started to do a lot there too. So what got you interested in getting more involved in different organizations and such?
I give you, you get an A+ for finding out about me. It started, so one, I've always been a joiner, right? Something it's in my blood. But during COVID, there was a very scary time. Well, there was lots of scary time. But at one point, it looked like veterinarians were not going to be considered essential workers. It was very brief. Okay. But there was a time that we were not on the list. We actually were, I think, 20th on the list when it came down to it. We came out after bottle distributors. And I was flabbergasted by it. I was like, and at one point, they were also talking about they were going to make us vaccinate. But I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to, a human, you're going to have us, like, recruit us basically from an emergency standpoint to vaccinate other people, which I'm not, that is what it is. But you're not going to, like, let us do our career of helping animals and knowing how important the human animal bond is. And all these people like craft their home, let alone like sick pets. And, I caught myself kind of going into that, like that negative space from like complain. And I was like, well, Brian, instead of complaining about it, why don't you get involved with the NVMA? Don't be one of those jerks who sit on the sideline and point fingers. And so I reached out and I said, hey, what can I do to help? And they were like, well, there's a director position over there. So I skipped all the beginning steps and jumped right to a director. And it's been fascinating. One, first, I give a lot of credit to anyone involved in organizing veterinary medicine. I realized there's a lot of red tape. And some of the things that we throw around, like, well, why can't they do this? Or why can't they do that? And why can't this path? Is not as easy as you would think. Or maybe I was just naive. And a lot of it has very little to do with us. It has to do with the legislature and voting. And so, Massachusetts is one of these states where there's licensing for technicians that's been required. And I'm not going to even get into that on this, whether pro or con. I mean, I'm pro, and there's reasons for con. But just, I was like, well, how is this? Like, I'm just going to go in there and like, I'm going to just explain it because, I'm me and I'll convince everybody. And, there was 20 different arguments on every side. And then ultimately, it wasn't our call. The call was made in the legislature. And so, it's been very eye-opening to me, and it helps me understand better how I can be a conduit for change. And it's not just by going around and saying my piece or listening, surprising, right? Listening to what people have to say and trying to change minds, right? That's part one. My work with the Positive Pet Care Guide was through, that was a Banfield back project of which they asked all the major organizations to take part of. So I was the NOMV representative, and it was amazing. I mean, I was so happy to be in that project because I saw other people similar to me who are frustrated and looking for a way to make change. And so that particular guidelines were around a kind of a pledge between clients and us. So we all know during COVID, things got nasty, right? Like people just started treating, first we were saints and then we couldn't do anything right? We all know the productivity went way down with curbside, and there were so many angry pet parents. I think in general, it was an angry time for everyone, right? It was our first pandemic. It didn't come with a rule book, but some of that nasty behavior kind of continued. And we realized it wasn't always on the client side. There were some veterinarians who weren't necessarily behaving in the best way. And so basically the idea was to provide a pledge of how we would conduct ourselves and how the clients should conduct themselves. Because some clients said, well, we didn't know we couldn't swear at you. It seems like that's the basic premise, but it's fair enough. Like, okay, this is what you have to do. And so it was a really exciting project to be on. And then the AVMA mentorship guidelines, I'm very, very passionate about mentorship. I think it really can, don't think, it makes or breaks your life as a veterinarian. When you've got a good mentor, and I see how it goes well. Like, I think we're really good at it, BBC now. We struggled a little bit in the beginning. Once again, there's no rule book on mentorship. And if some of the stuff that was out there was pretty crappy and kind of old. So AVMA did this task force where we really sat down and re-examined. And this included, cultures, religion and people of color, and talking about all the different things where, you can't just say, yep, I'm a mentor. And that, there needs to be a collaboration, and that there needs to be a partnership. It can't just be like preaching and saying, do it my way or the highway. You really need to be able to give feedback, and you need to be able to take feedback, right? So when I look at some of my earlier mentorship positions, I don't know that I didn't always take feedback. We've had some examples of people like, well, that's not how I learn. Like me going home and reading a book will work for you. I need to see it. I need to feel it. I need to touch it. I need to digest it. And so that's what it was so exciting to hear and see what mentorship meant to other people, and really question some of what we had, well, at least myself, had taken kind of mentorship gospel, if you will, and kind of turn it on its butt and say, you know what? No, maybe that's the way it used to be done. But this is how we should do it. This is how other people see it. Like, this isn't their life experience. And so it just was really an eye opener for me in a good way, and made me question a lot of the assumptions I had made. We all know what assuming does. And so I really, really enjoyed it, and, made some really great colleagues. And I guess that's the other thing I would say about, any type of organized veterinary professions is the relationships you make, right? So, I think as we get along further in some of our profession, we isolate ourselves, whether we need to or not. We kind of work next alongside the same people day after day. I've met so many incredible people in so many different areas of the veterinary profession with different stories and different paths and different realities that I think it helped me grow as a veterinarian. Because veterinarian is not all about medicine, right? Like most of us have got that part down. But, I use the word leader versus boss. I don't think I'm a boss anymore. I'm a leader. And that didn't happen overnight. And that happened by so many others like lifting me up and being there when I made mistakes and allowing me to make mistakes, how to learn from those mistakes. And saying, hey, you know what? I dealt with that once. That's how I handled it. And you can't do that when you're on an island. And so that was a lovely, for something that I got into to kind of get my way, if you will, which is not the right reason to get into something. I've learned so much more. And now there's so many people I can call on for help and vice versa. Because now I get, oh yeah, I've dealt with that. I've been involved with Andy Warwick's Uncharted Veterinary community. And probably weekly, I have people reaching out like, hey, you've got 5 clinics. How did you get to number 2? And how do you deal with culture across things? And how do you do this and how do you do that? And so we become this like kind of support group in real time. Like, Vin and other things are great, but this is kind of like real people in real time for this stuff that you can't find in Injured or Little Millers or whatever the case may be. So, and then I can just go one more step on that. I would love to talk about Clear Blueprint with NOMV just briefly, because I think that's another area of, it's an accreditation that's based on mental wellness and mental health. We all know that's an area that we struggle in as veterinarians. And so, having a group like that is the other place where I really feel like I've been able to give back and make a difference. And once again, have met such amazing other people who want to help this profession. Because once again, it is a beautiful profession. I think you would say the same, but it's struggle. There's areas where we made mistakes and where we had taken missteps. And so to learn from those mistakes and to have others who have struggled and overcome, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So that's what I've gotten from NOMV as NOMV president. I now a lot more weight on my shoulders, but I get to do things like that and talk to people and discuss like what my challenges are. But I've come around on the other side of it, and I can say I love veterinary medicine again.
Yeah. And on that note, you also mentioned that right now you feel maybe more fulfilled than you have yet in your career. And I don't think you're doing like complete full time as a clinical veterinarian. So what does your schedule kind of look like now? And why would you say that now you feel the most fulfilled ever?
Sure. Yeah. I only pretend to play the part of a veterinarian now, at least as far as a clinical veterinarian. I'm not on the schedule any one day. I live in Brookline now, so I get to walk to work. On Tuesdays are where I see my VIPs, or sometimes the people the other vets won't see. I mentor in dentistry on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Fridays are pure admin. Tuesdays are meetings. Yeah, I'm not in the exam room. I do it enough so that I still feel like I can speak about it with some amount of authority. So, for example, if veterinarians are on vacation, like I'm actually seeing appointments tomorrow, but I look forward to it now. It's like, yay! It's almost like I don't want to say it's like play, because that's downplaying important work that vets do. But it reminds me why I do this. It reminds me of the challenges my vets have, because I think if I lose that, then I'm not going to be as an effective leader. I need to remember what it's like to be in the exam room and the challenges that my veterinarians face. And there's a little bit of, we throw around the word imposter syndrome. There are times that, if I'm not in the exam room or if I'm not doing some surgery, dentistry, I start to be like, well, am I even a veterinarian? Ask this philosophical question. Am I even a veterinarian? Which is a different question. Of course I am. I don't need to see pets to be a veterinarian. There's many, many, many other ways of being a veterinarian in this world that don't involve clinical work. But, we do tend to be clinically focused, and I think sometimes can be a little judgy that way. So I've learned to embrace my non-clinicalness. And still, like, if one of my vets that I'm mentoring or one of the less experienced vets, they're still asking me questions, and I get to, be old Dr. B and give my wisdom and say, well, last time I've seen 3 of those. And I still learn from them. That's the other part of it about mentorship is, I touched on it briefly, is that we should be learning from those that we are mentoring. They've gone through school sooner than us. They're likely more up on technology than us. They see different things than us. And so it should be a reciprocal relationship. But yeah, if you had told me that 20 years out, I would own 5 practices and be involved in 3 or 4 different professional organizations and saw animals on a Tuesday morning, I would have laughed. I mean, that would have never seemed to be my reality. I thought I'd be seeing 5 days worth of patients till the day I graduate. I'm graduating, hello, till the day I retired. But I'm happy with this. And I think, I know for myself, I needed a change. I was getting close to burning out because I wasn't taking a break. I mean, I was doing the running the clinics and trying to be a full-time veterinarian. And for those who do it, like my hat goes off, but my gosh, I don't know how you've got time for anything else. And for me, my life was not full until I was able to go back to doing some charity work and nonprofit work and mentorship. Like that's where I am in my career now. And I think that's where I get best. And gosh forbid, I've slowed down. When I'm in the exam room, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And, oh yeah, I got to examine the animal and, entering charges and things now that the vets are in the thick of it can do faster. They don't want me in the exam room. Those texts are like, get out of the way, Dr. B, you slow it down. Though, I'm not as good at it. I'm better behind the scenes, advising and mentoring and saying, hey, like I know someone who's seen this once. So that's where I'm at and I love it. And, it's where I imagine I will be till I do retire.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for what you do. I've been very fascinated about learning more about NOMV too. I didn't realize how much that they did and all the different programs and everything. So love learning more about them. And so just before we wrap up, I have a final few questions for you to learn more about you. And so first of all, do you have a skill or an interest that maybe not a lot of people know about?
Well, I have won many dance competitions, unofficial dance competitions, but I'm quite a dancer. And that's like freestyle, not like ballet besides me, I'm obviously not ballet. But I've won many a contest in the veterinary dancing realm, and so I'm pretty good at it. Pretty good. My nickname is Tigger for many different reasons. I like to jump around. I'm always going. But if you saw me on the dance floor, Tigger definitely would come to mind.
Okay, well, now everybody knows to look for you at the conference dance party. Fantastic. Is there something on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Travel more, which it may sound cliche, but during COVID, we ended up becoming full-time parents. So prior to that, we only had, my husband had 2 daughters from his past marriage. We only had them on a weekend a month and a couple weeks of the summer. And they came to live with us full-time. And prior to that, we traveled a lot, my husband and I. And that really, between COVID and other things, it just really taken a back burner. And I miss it. I mean, I think one of the ways that you come to remember just how lucky we have it or how fortunate we are is sometimes to go visit other cultures and other things, because you can start to take things for granted. And I love meeting new people in different cultures in different places. Obviously wildlife. I love to see animals in other areas. We were in Mexico a few weeks ago, first vacation we're taking this year. And I saw a coati, which, it was like a scruffy coati. It's a Mexican raccoon. But, the joy I get from seeing wildlife in its natural phase. I mean, you would think I'd never seen an animal before. I mean, I literally like screeching, like, oh, coati. And I love that when that little kid in me comes out again, which, doesn't happen so much in day-to-day stuff. But, I miss traveling. I definitely miss the wildlife and new wildlife. And I'm excited to start embarking on some more of those trips in the years to come.
Fantastic. And finally, what is something that you are very grateful for?
I don't know if there's only one thing. I'm just grateful for everything. I mean, I think I'm incredibly blessed. I never would have imagined being where I am in this life. I guess the thing I'm most grateful for is I came to Massachusetts when I was in 8th grade. I was on a field trip to go whale watching. There was something called Project Me, which looking back was kind of an anti-drug program, although I didn't realize it was an anti-drug program. And she watched this little mini series, and we took a mini bus from near Watertown, New York, all the way to Cape Cod, very long trip. And I remember walking the street from Provincetown, being really interested about what all this gay stuff was about, but then going out on a whale watch and being like, oh my God, this is still what I thought I wanted to do, exotics and all that stuff. And I said to myself, someday I'm going to live here. 2 years ago, we bought our home in Provincetown. And so I am my happy place. Even got teary-eyed talking about it. Is just like realizing that dream comes true. And guess what? I see. When I was flying home yesterday, I saw whales as we were leaving the airport, and I had just a little flashback to like, wow, it's come full circle. So I'm grateful for a lot, but I'm great I was able to make that dream come true. And you know what? Veterinary medicine is what made that dream come true for me.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn, where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn, on the website at vetlifereimagined.com, and brand new is that you can text me. To send me a text message, find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.